Hello everyone, welcome to Discover This. Today we are in Balboa Park in San Diego, and we're going to talk about the history of the Starlight Bowl and all the different shows they've had here, and just some of the history of when it was built and why it was built, and just take a look around and what's left of it anyway as it kind of deteriorates here. So let's go explore. So the Starlight Bowl was built in 1935 for the 1935-1936 California International Pacific Exposition. It was originally named the Ford Bowl, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. But as you can see, they've built these metal boxes around the shell, the performance shell. Now, the person who designed the shell and the acoustics is the same gentleman who designed the shell for the Hollywood Bowl. So, now for the 35-36 exposition, the symphony would play in here. Different symphonies: San Diego Symphony, San Francisco Symphony, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir came in, and they would perform in here. And the symphonies, those performances, they would broadcast across the United States. And this bowl holds over 3,000 people, close to 4. But people could come in and listen to the symphony as part of their day at the exposition. So as I mentioned, the Starlight Bowl, when it was first built, was called the Ford Bowl. And this building next door was the Ford Building, which is now the San Diego Air and Space Museum. And back in 1935, 1936, Ford sponsored these two buildings, and they displayed the automobiles that they had available at that time, mostly in the Ford Building, but they displayed some on the concourse here of the Ford Bowl at the time. And they would display their vehicles all along in here for people to check out. So after the expo, the symphonies continued to perform here in the bowl, and then they started bringing in some vaudeville acts and things like that. And the city ended up renaming the bowl the Balboa Bowl. And there was a local civic opera organization that started producing some light opera and musicals, and started doing those performances. And they did that for many years. You know, things like The Music Man, Sound of Music, Annie, that kind of thing. Now, the unique thing about the bowl, if you haven't just heard, is that it's right under the flight path for Lindbergh Field. So planes fly right over the top of this area. Now, when they're doing, you know, those Broadway type plays, musicals and things, the performers would have to freeze and hold their position while the plane went over, and then when the plane cleared the area, they could resume. And I saw a number of plays here where that happened, and it was very unique. Now when you have 4 or 5 planes go over in an hour, it's not too big of a deal. It's doable. But when you get upwards of 25 to 30, that's when it becomes a problem. So that was kind of one of the reasons people stopped going, is it was just so much interruption. So from this angle you can see the back half of the shell. So really what they did is they just built these big structures over the shell, and that was to help with sets and the decorations and things that they would use for the performances. Now when the bowl was first built in 1935, the seating was benches. I don't know if you can tell now, but they basically have stadium style seats now. Now in 1984, the city changed the name again from Balboa Bowl to the Starlight Bowl. And for a number of years, for about 20 plus years, the Ford building was used as storage for the different plays and performances that were held in the bowl. So it was just used as a storage facility for many years. Now, in addition to the plays and the symphonies, musicals, things like that, they also started holding concerts here. And they had a number of people perform here, including Ella Fitzgerald, Jim Croce. But one of the more significant performances, in my opinion anyway, was the fact that the Rolling Stones played here in 1964 on the second leg of their first US tour. And they had performed, let's see, that was on, I can't remember, I believe it was in November of 1964. And earlier in the day they had played a show in Long Beach, California, and then they came down here to San Diego and did an evening show. Now, tickets for the Rolling Stones were $3.50, and again, this bowl holds over 3,000 people, but there was just a little over 300 people in attendance. So once the promoters saw that everyone was here that was going to pay to be here, they basically opened the gates and let anyone who wanted to come through and come in and sit down and see the Rolling Stones. Now, while the Rolling Stones weren't quite Beatlemania, there was still a lot of hoopla about British bands and things like that. So during the Rolling Stones performance, the San Diego Police Department was on stage with them to keep the fanatics off the stage. But there was a lot of shows here, especially during the 80s and early 90s. A lot of shows, a lot of hard rock shows, punk shows, country shows. One of the other issues, if you want to call it that, with the facility, even though it's a fantastic facility for concerts, you don't get the issue with the noise from the airplanes. You see the lights going overhead, but you can't hear the planes when the concert's going on. The airplanes really only affect the musicals and the Broadway plays, things like that. But one of the other issues with concerts was the fact that this access to the backstage, you know, where you load in and load out all your equipment and the band members and things, you have to access via this really steep hill. And I don't know if you can appreciate from this video how steep this really is. And there were many production trucks and band buses and things that just could not get down this hill. or wouldn't be able to get back up. So they would have to park up at the top and offload, and they would get golf carts and things and bring all the equipment down and load into the facility and then load it back up that way. There were some trucks that could get down here, but there were some that were just too big, too cumbersome to make that hill. Just another angle of the ramp going down to the load-in area. If it helps give you a better idea of just how steep this really is. Just an angle of the plaza area today to compare to photos from the exposition in 1935, 1936. And you can see the old Ford building in the back, and the Starlight Bowl is way off to the left. So there are some organizations that are trying to save the Starlight Bowl, get funds to rehabilitate it. I know there was a grant they just received for some ADA refurbishments, so Americans with Disabilities Act, so access ramps and handicap seating and stuff like that. So they are getting some money, but unfortunately this has been in such disrepair for so long. I'm not sure if they can really ever bring it back to what it once was, which is a shame. I don't know if you can see down in there where there's actually weeds growing up in the seats, which is a shame. But again, they've changed all the seating out to this stadium seating where it was bench seating when it was originally built. But again, there were just hundreds of concerts here for many years until the civic organization had to finally close it down just because they weren't making any money. And again, people stopped coming to the shows, and you know, part of it had to do with the airplanes and so many planes flying over, you know, as flights into San Diego increased. So that's too bad. It's too bad they can't refurbish it just to make it for concerts, because it is a great concert facility. There's no noise restrictions here. Now, if you can hear that music, I believe they piped that in there to keep the transients out from sleeping in there. That's my theory anyway. And unfortunately, this just sits out here in the elements. A different angle from the backstage area. So that's going to do it, ladies and gentlemen, from the Starlight Bowl in San Diego. I thank you for watching, and I do appreciate you watching all the videos, and we will see you next time on Discover This.